The stars over Sidora Prime burned white and distant, their light scattering across the silent debris field where New Avalon had once shimmered with life. Now, there was nothing but drifting corpses, frozen fragments of steel, and the faint afterglow of plasma fire. The colony's transmission had lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds before the signal died, enough time for the entire galaxy to watch humanity bleed. The feed had gone live across the galactic network, unfiltered and raw. Billions of aliens had watched the Drax Imperium's ships open fire on an unarmed human city, watched as men, women, and children screamed into their calms for evacuation that never came. The galaxy saw burning towers crumble on another world and human soldiers die defending families who thought peace treaties meant safety. And then, silence. Just the hum of a distant beacon repeating. This is New Avalon Colony. We are under attack. Civilians down. Repeat. The transmission ended in static. Back on Earth, in the glass heart of Washington arcology, the reaction was not immediate rage. It was stillness, the kind of stillness that precedes an earthquake. In the command chambers of the Global Security Directorate, screens glowed cold blue as intelligence reports flooded in. There was confusion at first, disbelief, and then realization that the Drax hadn't made a mistake. It was deliberate. A message. At the center of the war room stood Admiral Elias Ward, tall, graying, a man built from 40 years of quiet wars and political restraint. His jaw was locked tight as he watched the replay. Around him, aides whispered, strategists argued, and analysts cried into their hands. "Cut the feed," Ward said quietly. No one moved. "Cut it," he repeated, and the hollow went dark. Only then did the silence shatter. "Sir, the Council's demanding restraint." Restraint? Ward turned sharply toward the young diplomat who'd spoken. They slaughtered 30,000 civilians. Children. And you want to talk? The Accord forbids retaliation without consensus. The Drax are claiming it was an accident? Ward barked a laugh that had no humor. We saw the footage. Targeted strikes. Civilian grids first. That's not an accident, that's extermination. But he didn't raise his voice after that. He simply straightened his uniform and said, "Get me President Monroe." The call came through minutes later from the orbital residence, where President Kara Monroe had been watching the same broadcast with her cabinet. The woman looked like she hadn't blinked in 10 minutes. When Ward's face appeared, she only said one word. "How bad?" Ward hesitated. Then. "Worse than Mars Outpost. Worse than anything we've seen since the Great Divide." Her hands trembled once, then steadied on the desk. Casualties? All confirmed gone. No survivors. They wiped it clean. For a long time, she didn't answer. Only the faint hum of the hollow feed filled the void. Finally, Monroe exhaled. And the Council? Calling for investigation, Ward said bitterly. They want hearings. Committees. Condemnations. Monroe leaned back, eyes glinting cold under the room's sterile light. They want us to sit still while they decide what justice means. They want us quiet, Ward corrected. Because if we ever stop pretending. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Monroe looked at him for a long time. Elias, the mask protocols were never meant for this. They were meant for survival, Ward replied. And survival's exactly what's at stake. Later that night, as rain hissed across the dome of Washington arcology, a single encrypted order was transmitted to every human fleet across the solar system. It contained 7 words. Initiate silence. Authorization, Black Shield. To the public, Earth mourned. The networks filled with vigils, speeches, and endless analysis. The Galactic Council promised investigations. The Drax ambassador expressed regret. The galaxy moved on, as it always did when humans were the ones dying. But beneath the surface, something ancient stirred. In hidden shipyards buried under the crust of Luna, construction bays sealed themselves off. In asteroid facilities marked as research labs, massive vaults unlocked for the first time in a century. On the dark side of Mars, engineers removed red flags from their consoles and began inputting codes that hadn't been spoken aloud in generations. They called it Operation Silence, a name whispered only among admirals and ghosts of black projects that had never officially existed. Because the truth was, Earth had never trusted the galaxy's peace. Not after what happened to the first colonists. Not after watching entire species turn neutrality into complicity. Humanity had prepared for the day peace would fail. 2 days later, the Galactic Council Hall shimmered with light as leaders of 100 species gathered under the Great Dome. The Drax envoy, a creature of scales and arrogance, stood before the assembly and offered an apology that sounded more like amusement. "Collateral damage," he said in his guttural growl. "Your colonists were unfortunate casualties." The chamber rippled with nervous murmurs. Humans sat silent, eyes unreadable. President Monroe rose slowly from her seat, the only sound her heels echoing on the obsidian floor. She said nothing at first. Just stared at the Drax ambassador until even his smirk faltered. Then, softly, she spoke. "Your empire believes humanity is fragile. That our restraint is weakness. You think peace is something we begged for." She leaned forward. "You are wrong." And with that, she placed a small black device on the council table, a transmitter. The holographic feed activated, showing New Avalon burning again. But this time, it cut to a new image, a fleet, black as void, rising from the moon. No insignias. No records. No official existence. Gasps filled the chamber. Someone shouted, "That's impossible." President Monroe turned off the feed. "Earth," she said, her voice low but carrying across the hall, "has been patient. But patience ends tonight." Outside, as the council scrambled, encrypted transmissions leapt between relay stations across Sol. On Titan, cryogenic hangars opened like awakening beasts. On Earth's surface, skies filled with thunder as the Black Shield fleet came online. And in orbit, Admiral Ward stood on the command deck of the dreadnought ISS Dauntless, watching engines ignite one by one. Beside him, his aide whispered, "Sir, if we do this, there's no going back." Ward didn't answer for a long time. He looked out at the stars, cold, indifferent witnesses, and then said, "They pushed too far. Now they'll see who we really are." The fleet broke formation and vanished into the dark. The void between stars had never felt so alive. They came without warning, a silence so vast it crushed every sensor, every communication channel across the galactic lanes. One by one, human ships emerged from shadows that shouldn't exist, from gravity wells that should have been empty. Their hulls reflected no light, no spectrum signature. They didn't announce themselves because they didn't need to. They were already inside the Drax territories. At first, the galaxy thought it was rumor. A miscommunication. Then the first feed came in, a shaky transmission from a Drax patrol frigate orbiting Tyrus 9, their main fuel depot. The feed showed a black shape sliding through space, massive and silent. Then, nothing. The feed ended in static. The Drax tried to deny it, but within hours, 4 of their colonies went dark. No survivors. No wreckage. Just silence. From the bridge of the ISS Dauntless, Admiral Elias Ward watched as the Drax border systems burned. The holographic display before him flickered with reports: Tyrus 9, neutralized. Dranketh Shipyard, neutralized. Outpost Theta, evacuated before strike. Ward's face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 30,000 dead civilians from New Avalon. Every decision now was personal. "Status of the fleet?" he asked. "Phase 2 squadrons are in position," Commander Lena Carver replied. Her voice was steady, but there was awe behind it. The Drax defense grid collapsed within the first hour. They weren't ready for stealth kinetics. "They never are," Ward said softly. "They've been fighting ghosts their entire history. We just gave them one." Carver hesitated, then asked, "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Ward nodded. This isn't retaliation anymore. It's annihilation." Ward turned to her, expression unreadable. "When they slaughtered our people, they didn't just declare war. They declared permission. He leaned closer. We spent a century being civilized. Negotiating. Pretending to be one of them. But humanity's never been tamed, Commander. We just learned how to hide the fangs. Back on Earth, in the underground command hub known as Bastion Deep, President Kara Monroe stood before a wall of screens displaying the entire operation in real time. Every system under attack glowed red. Every Drax world that once mocked human fragility was now burning under kinetic bombardment from orbit. Her chief advisor, Daniel Rourke, stared in disbelief. Madam President, we've crossed every line in the accord. The Council will condemn us? Monroe's voice was steady. Let them. The Council watched a massacre and sent condolences. We're done begging for moral approval. Then this isn't justice, Rourke said quietly. It's vengeance. Monroe's gaze hardened. Then vengeance is overdue. The Drax Imperium was powerful, arrogant, brutal, ancient. But for all their might, they'd never encountered a species that prepared for war while pretending peace. Humanity had spent decades perfecting an arsenal that no treaty knew existed. Gravitic stealth drives that bent light in sensor waves. Self-replicating drones that harvested raw material from asteroid belts. Singularity torpedoes designed to erase entire fleets without debris. And orbital rail platforms hidden in deep black zones, codenamed Hellspires, capable of firing slugs faster than light. The Drax learned about them all in a single night. In the Drax capital system of Vorik, panic spread faster than lightspeed newsfeeds could update. Civilians flooded shelters as the first human strike wave descended from orbit. Their planetary shields, once considered impenetrable, folded under the focused assault of 10 synchronized kinetic barrages. Drax generals screamed into their combs, demanding reinforcements. Their fleets scrambled to regroup, but for every Drax ship that appeared, 3 human destroyers were already waiting. Within hours, the skies above Vorik were filled with streaks of plasma and the silent thunder of rail fire. The great spires of the Drax capital, monuments of their supremacy, cracked, toppled, and burned. And then humanity's message arrived. A single transmission, broadcast on every frequency, every world, every language. This is Earth Command. You massacred our children. You called it collateral. We call it an answer. We are not your subjects. We are not your prey. You wanted to see humanity without the mask? Now you will. The message repeated for 6 minutes, then cut to silence. Across the galaxy, every race listening, every empire, every council member felt something ancient stir in their bones. Back aboard the Dauntless, Commander Carver turned toward the Admiral, voice hushed. Sir, reports coming in from Council space. Multiple governments are denouncing the strikes. They're calling us war criminals. Ward almost smiled. Good. Means they're afraid. Do we continue? Ward looked through the viewport at the burning horizon of Vorik. The planet's crust was splitting under the bombardment, magma rivers glowing like veins of blood. We finish this, he said. Then we talk. At dawn, what remained of the Drax High Command finally reached out, a desperate transmission from Overlord Tharn, their supreme leader. His image flickered before Ward, eyes wild with disbelief and fury. You dare strike the Imperium? Tharn snarled. You are nothing. A primitive race. Ward cut him off. We were primitive when you slaughtered our people. Not anymore. Tharn slammed his claws on the table. You'll burn for this. The Council. The Council watched, Ward said, voice low. They did nothing. So we stopped asking permission. He leaned forward, expression carved from stone. Withdraw from human space. Every outpost. Every system. You have 1 day. Tharn hissed. And if we don't? Ward didn't answer. He simply turned to his tactical officer. Fire demonstration round. Moments later, a beam lanced from the Dauntless' ventral cannon, invisible to the naked eye, and struck Vorik's third moon. The moon didn't explode. It ceased existing, its matter folded into a collapsing singularity that swallowed itself in silence. When the screen reconnected, Ktharn was no longer shouting. Ward spoke once more. You have your answer. By the next rotation, the Drax fleet withdrew from human territory. Entire systems went dark as they retreated inward, terrified and humiliated. The Council convened an emergency session, calling for sanctions, ceasefires, investigations. But the galaxy already knew. Earth had changed the rules. The species once mocked as naive diplomats had just destroyed one of the oldest empires in 2 days, without a single loss. As the fires of Vorak faded, Admiral Ward stood in silence at the observation deck. Commander Carver approached quietly. Sir, reports confirm all objectives achieved. The Drax surrender communique just came through. Ward didn't look at her. And the civilians of New Avalon? Still gone, she said softly. Ward nodded. Then it's not victory. Carver hesitated, then asked, what happens now? Ward's eyes stayed on the stars. Now, he murmured. Now the galaxy starts fearing us again. And maybe that's the only piece they'll understand. In Bastion Deep, President Monroe watched the final transmission from the fleet, the confirmation of Drax's surrender. Her advisors cheered. She didn't. She simply whispered to herself, God forgive us, because they won't. Outside, over the silent night of Earth, the stars shimmered brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. For 3 days, the galaxy stood still. The Drax Imperium, the terror of 100 worlds, was gone, not defeated, but erased. The ashes of their empire drifted through cold space, unburied, unspoken. Every species watched the footage in silence, fleets burning, planets collapsing, an empire brought to its knees by the people they'd once called the Council's children. And in that silence, fear took root. At the Galactic Council Hall, chaos reigned. The chamber that had once been a monument to diplomacy now echoed with accusation and panic. Delegates shouted over one another, reptilian, crystalline, insectoid, all united in the same trembling question. What is humanity? Reports from across the stars told the same story, human fleets moving in absolute silence, returning home without explanation. No occupation. No victory speeches. No looting. They had struck and then simply vanished. But the damage wasn't only physical. Every treaty, every balance of power, every assumption of superiority had just been shattered. President Kara Monroe stood at the heart of the council chamber, her posture unyielding amid the storm of condemnation. You violated every code of conduct, roared Chancellor Viacor of the Wrath Dominion, his scaled fist slamming against the obsidian table. You unleashed weapons banned for centuries. Monroe's voice was calm. We didn't sign your codes to protect you from consequence. You've destabilized the entire quadrant, another shouted. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, Monroe said simply. I've reminded you what happens when you slaughter our people and expect silence. A hush rippled across the room. Every eye turned toward her. Monroe leaned forward, her voice colder than the void. For a century, we wore the mask of civility because we thought peace was possible. But peace without respect isn't peace, it's submission. And humanity does not submit. The council chamber erupted again, but Monroe no longer listened. She turned, her escort falling in behind her as she left the hall. Outside, the stars above the capital station glowed faintly red, the light of Vorak's dying embers still traveling across the cosmos. Back aboard the ISS Dauntless, orbiting quietly beyond Neptune, Admiral Elias Ward and his crew awaited orders. The fleet had returned to Sol space, its mission complete, its existence no longer a secret. Every ship scarred, every crew haunted, but alive. Ward stood alone at the viewport, staring at Earth far below. Its continents gleamed like islands of light against the dark. For a moment, he almost allowed himself to feel pride. Then the transmission arrived. Admiral Ward, President Monroe's voice came through, steady but distant. The Council is uniting against us. Sanctions, embargoes, and collective disarmament. Ward's jaw clenched. Meaning? Meaning, Monroe said, they're preparing for war. The Council fleets began massing along human borders within the week, a show of unity, of power, of fear. Dozens of species, centuries of rivalry forgotten in a single cause: containment. The official declaration spoke of ensuring interstellar stability. Everyone knew what it really meant. Ward gathered his commanders in the dauntless briefing room. The air was tense, heavy with exhaustion and resolve. Commander Lena Carver was first to speak. "They'll come for us," she said. "Every one of them. They can't let us exist after what we did." Ward nodded. "Then we'll exist anyway." Another officer frowned. "Sir, with respect, we don't have the numbers to take on the entire council. Even with the Black Shield fleet." Ward raised a hand. "This isn't about fighting them. Not yet. It's about showing them there's no profit in trying." He brought up a holomap, every council fleet marked in bright red, slowly encircling Sol. Then he pointed to the outer edge. "They think they're hunting lions. What they don't realize is they're walking into a den full of ghosts." Carver stared at the map. "Sir, you're activating the old network?" Ward's gaze hardened. "All of it." In hidden corners of the solar system, the mask protocols awakened. Deep under Europa's ice crust, sleeper stations hummed to life. Satellites disguised as comets turned their sensors outward. And in the asteroid belt, old weapons, relics from before the Council era, armed themselves once more. Within hours, the skies above Earth filled with artificial constellations, defense grids, stealth fleets, drone swarms, all silently repositioning. Humanity, it seemed, had never truly disarmed. Meanwhile, on the Council's side, fear bred desperation. Some members urged diplomacy, others called for a preemptive strike. The idea of a human containment cordon gained traction. But deep down, no one truly wanted to test what they had just seen. The memory of Vorax's disintegration haunted every commander who'd watched it live. The galaxy had seen many wars, but never an enemy that fought without hatred, only resolve. Back on Earth, Monroe met with Ward in person for the first time since the massacre. The room was dark, the city below still flickering from nightly storms. "You did what you had to," she said quietly. "I did what they forced us to," Ward replied. "But now the question is, what comes after?" Monroe looked at the holographic map of the Council fleets. "We can't go back," she said. "Even if we wanted to. They'll never see us as anything but a threat now." Ward turned toward the window. "Maybe that's the point." Monroe frowned. "You think fear is the answer?" Ward looked at her, eyes hollow. "It's the only language the galaxy ever respected." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Monroe asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you ever wonder if we become the very thing they feared?" Ward thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said softly. "We became what they made us." 2 days later, the Council fleets reached the border of human space. Every scanner, every weapon, every ship aimed toward the Sol system, waiting for the order to strike. Instead, they found nothing. No response. No transmissions. No ships visible. Until the stars themselves began to move. Hundreds of black shapes shimmered into view, the full strength of the Black Shield Armada, each vessel armed, silent, perfectly aligned. Behind them, defense stations powered up, their energy signatures forming an invisible wall of light. Then a message broadcast across every frequency, calm and clear. To the Galactic Council, Admiral Ward's voice said, "Approach, and we will not warn you twice. Withdraw, and peace remains possible. But know this: Earth remembers. And we no longer pretend to be anything we're not." The fleets froze. No one fired. No one moved. Minutes passed. Then one by one, the Council ships began to turn away. The war that should have ended civilizations ended instead with silence, the same silence that had started it. Months later, the galaxy returned to uneasy calm. The Council survived, but forever changed. No one spoke of containment again. No one dared. Humanity retreated into its own systems, no longer seeking approval or alliance. Earth became a myth, the world that had dropped the mask and shown the universe its true face. In the quiet aftermath, Admiral Ward stood alone in the dauntless observation deck, watching Earth's sunrise bloom across the curve of the planet. Commander Carver approached, her voice soft. "Sir, it's over." Ward didn't look away. "It'll never really be over. But maybe now, they'll think twice before calling us weak." She nodded slowly. "And if they don't?" Ward's reflection in the glass looked almost like a ghost. "Then," he said, "we remind them again." The dawn spread across the oceans, golden and endless. For the first time in a long time, Earth was silent, not out of fear, but power. And beyond the horizon, the stars waited, watching a species that had finally stopped pretending to be civilized. Because the galaxy had pushed too far. And humanity had dropped the mask.